very excited to welcome on to the show our former coach, Jimbo Fisher. Coach, what's going on? How you doing?
What's up, guys?
Can you believe that I got Matthew Clayton Flynn up before 7 a.m.?
It's unbelievable. That's what I said. I was worried. You said you had that early show. I said, is he going to show up halfway through, or what's the deal?
I was an extremely accomplished sleeper in college. I think there was one time I slept about 15 straight hours. Jack Marucci couldn't even track it.
I remember. It's funny. I remember that. He used to sleep all the time. That's what I did that to Hester. He was laughing at me.
Never in meetings, though.
No. When it was time to go now, there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that.
Coach, we were talking last week with Flynn before he started. I think I got to ask you the question, how did you recruit an honorable mention all-district quarterback in a district that only had 4 teams and the guy was honorable mention?
I'm going to tell you one of the funniest stories you're ever going to hear. This is honest to God's truth. We go, and this is how – because Matt's one of the most accomplished – a guy that what he did in high school – really impressed me, because if I'm not right, Matt, but your junior year, you split time with another guy.
I did until
am I right? Y'all were back
or
and
third
forth.
game. Yeah, we split
till halfway through your junior year.
Yeah,
till halfway through your junior year. After about 6 games, he made the decision. The kid was a great athlete, because you had a bunch of schools come to you and say, "Hey, transfer here. You don't have to put up with it." And you got mad, quit all your other sports, said, "Nope, I'm gonna be the starting quarterback," and went and won the job. So he'd only played a little bit. So we did we searched. And so I'm watching all this film, and they put this film in front of me. I remember I got the film and I watched, and I said, I really liked it. And they said, well, Jimbo, this guy ain't hardly ever played. It's just, he only started 6 games. We need to slow down. And I said, well, that's at the time when those combines, the coaches could go to them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a combine at A&M. And Derek Dooley had that part of Houston and down there, and there was a combine at A&M. And so Matt was going to be at that Nike combine. I think it was Nike. I believe it was Nike.
Yep, Nike camp.
Yep.
Am I right, Matt?
Yep, that's right.
All right. So we get back, and I said, this guy's under the radar, Derek, but go wide. He runs well. He's athletic. The way they don't throw it a lot, because your coach, I remember, he was from Louisiana.
He's a two-lane offensive lineman.
Yep, and that's what he wanted to do, run the football.
That's
and
right.
y'all ended up having a great team, because y'all flipped it around and won a couple of state championships after that. But anyway, so I said, just go look at this guy. This is a guy that may sneak under the radar, that just we could get in on. I mean, we were on everybody in the country, but I said, I like this guy as well as anybody.
Yeah.
So Derek's a young coach. Derek goes to the combine. And Derek used to come up with some of the craziest reasons to like a guy or not like a guy. And so he comes back and he said, he's not overly tall. He was about 6'1" at that time. Am I right, Matt? Does that sound about right?
Sounds about right, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so he said he's not really, but he said he moved pretty well. But he said, this and this now. He said, Jimbo, I just didn't like him. He said he had fat ankles. He said he had fat ankles. We always used to, most of your athletes have skinny ankles. You know what I mean? He said he had fat ankles, and he was okay, but just and I said, this kind of downplayed him. And I said, dang, that's not what, I said, of course I said, okay, Derek, you were there. You saw him in person. So this was probably around February or March. And I said, that just doesn't sound. I didn't match up. Later on, I get so thorough on things. I'll check, recheck, rewatch film, and go watch. I'll watch a player 10 times, because sometimes you're in the wrong mood. You get a different impression of a guy. You know what I mean? Right. Or if you had something on your mind, you'll watch a guy. Sometimes you evaluate. So I try to do it multiple times to be very thorough. So I go back and I watch the film, and I said, what Derek said don't match up with this film. I said, I love this guy. I said, there's something about this guy. So, of course, then you couldn't get Nick. If you when you went with him, if you didn't have your I's dotted and T's crossed when you took him recruiting, okay? He went in. He was only going in for the kill. You know what I mean? Back then. He was going in to see the school, bang, 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 bang. So I got to find a way to get him to go by this school without knowing that it's somebody we don't like. If I bring it up at the meeting, Derek's going to say, Jimbo, I saw that guy and he had fat ankles. We'll have that conversation. Okay. So I can't remember how we did it, but there was another guy in that area that was getting recruited. And I said, we're out there. And I think Kurt Dahl was with us at the time too, because he had the area.
Yeah.
That's who had area guys and then position guys. So I said, somehow I said, Kurt, we got to go by this school. So we go by Tyler, Not John Tyler, because John Tyler at that time was at school.
Right.
That was where Earl Campbell went to school, and then Aaron Ross and all those guys. Am I not right?
That's right.
Yep.
And your district was the number 1 district in the state of Texas.
Oh,
You had Lufkin, John Tyler, y'all, and who else would have been in that?
Longview. Yep.
Longview. I mean, whoever won the state championship all come out of that deal. Y'all had won like 2, and y'all were the lesser school. Am I not right?
Yeah,
leading
up to that time. Yeah, we sure were.
Yeah, exactly. I remember that. And so we go by, and we went in and talked to the coach, and Nick's looking side-eyed at me. And sometime back then, I was the only one that could say something. I used to, we battled at it, and I would stand up to him every now and then. It'd been in a good way. Nick was so thorough. I don't mean that in a bad way. So he goes, okay, I'll go watch this guy. So we go in there, we talk to the coach, and I said, but y'all didn't throw it a lot, so it's hard to judge. He said, well, I tell you what, I'll throw it today. And y'all had a scrimmage. I don't know if you remember this or not.
I do.
We're there in the spring. So we come in, and y'all scrimmage that day, and y'all threw like 25 passes. He threw like 25 passes in the scrimmage. Bang, bang, bang. Matt completes like 24 of them.
Yeah.
He's running around making plays, and he's throwing the ball all over. And, Nick come over to me. He looked at me. Said, Jimbo, this guy's a really good. I said, I told you he's a really good player. He said, well, why didn't we do him? And I said, because Derek said he had fat ankles and he didn't look bad. He said he did, he wasn't nothing special.
Oh my God.
And I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this. He says, get Derek on the phone. He told me, he said, get Derek on the phone. We're standing there watching the scrimmage. So I called Derek up. I said, hey, Nick wants to talk to you. Nick grabbed the phone. He said, hey, Derek, don't you ever recruit another, don't you ever evaluate another quarterback. This guy looks like Johnny Unitas running around here. He said, he's throwing every ball crazy. He looks good. Derek don't know what to say. I get the phone back, and I'm laughing like crazy. You know how, because Nick would chew you out.
Oh, yeah.
I get the phone back, and I'm laughing like crazy. I said, fat ankles, huh? I said, he wasn't a girl, Derek.
Coach.
I was laughing like crazy.
Oh,
and so he came to then Derek, and then Matt came to camp that summer and lit it up, and we offered him. Matter of fact, I mean, that was a really good recruiting year that year for quarterback. I said, but I love Matt as much.
Yeah.
And he committed. He was the first one that committed that year, and we signed him and Jamarcus. And he played his tail off, and no matter what, and I knew he was going to be a great. Just evaluation, we saw it. I'm not trying to say we saw everything in the world, but he did it on film. He just didn't have a lot of opportunity. Then your senior year, I remember the tragic story to y'all season. Y'all had one of the best years you ever had, and you're on the state semifinals. Y'all drove in a 2-minute drive. I don't know who you're playing. You're down around the 10-yard line, 10, 15-yard line. You're going in to score and win the game, and you walked up to make a check, and your center snapped the ball about 30 yards backwards while you went up to make a check.
Sure did.
Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, I do. I hope he's not listening right now.
I hope he is.
Yeah,
what are we doing?
That's good.
The ball, the quarterback.
No. I mean, it happened to our guys. You were making a check, and not a lot of people did all the shotgun. Y'all, and that was a little new for y'all too.
Yeah.
I mean, and then because y'all were going in to win to go into the state championship, and you lost it. And then after that, your team won a couple state championships and became a great team. But Matt started that whole trend. And the thing about it was amazing to me, though. You split time as a junior. And then only played half the time, and he had the great scene. Then everybody started recruiting him after the senior year, of course, and he stuck with us. And the rest is history. Yep. But to me, it was a testament of who you were as a person. That's the kind of guy you wanted to play quarterback. Every time a guy got tested or challenged, he wasn't going to back down. And I'll say that both y'all were like that. Y'all are. I know why y'all are friends. In my opinion, you're very similar people. Because you both weren't high recruited guys earlier in your careers. You weren't the 5-star guys. You turned out to be 5-star guys. The way you played, the way you think. And somebody asked me that not too long ago. And I said, the one thing about those LSU teams, we recruited really well there, had a lot of 5-star guys. But so many of our great players weren't the highly rated guys that turned out to be just as good or better than the 5-star guys and developed yourself. You two, Corey Webster, Blue Gay. Yeah. I mean, Travis Daniels. There was guys on those teams. I mean, I can go on and on and on that were not highly recruited guys that turned out to play in the NFL a long time and were great players in college and great pros that also fit in with those guys and were even tougher and we had a mentality on that team, and you guys were the key to a big part of that.
To that point, Jimbo, you talk about instincts in recruiting back when Jake and I were coming out. This day and age in college football,
Jacob was playing nose guard when I went and watched him practice.
He was a little fat boy. Do you think, like, this day and age in college football, is there less instincts in recruiting because there's so many different services. You got to recruit the players that are on your roster, and you're recruiting other people in other colleges plus high school. Is it
well? Here's the other thing about it. As soon as you get one, and he starts to play now, and if they don't go to a major school, they're going to get, like I said, everybody else is a JUCO for everybody. You're going to go get bought and taken away from that school. The guys that do go do a great job of that, and it's hard to hold on to. And I tell you what's happened today. Guys are picking guys, and they're trying to buy guys. I mean, I say buy guys as a term because it's about the money instead of all the time and effort that goes into evaluating that process and recruiting that guy with the relationship. You know what I mean? It is. Yep. It's definitely changed, and it's. I mean, as far as that part of it, it's a shame. And in some of those, that's why I pity some of these other schools. And I even say this: if you're not in the SEC or Big Ten, now maybe Clemson, Florida State, some of these other, there may be a Big 12 team or two in there, but everybody else is a JUCO to SEC and Big Ten teams because they got all the money, and they can go select and pick those guys and take them away once they do evaluate them and get them in that process. But I do think a little bit of that has left, in my opinion, college football, and guys are going around not spending as much time building relationships as they are saying, well, here's 400, 500, whatever the value. That's just the nature of the beast. The whole world's changed, and it's a shame. It really is, because I used to love that part of it. I mean, a lot of those guys happen to be guys that I recruited, Randall and Corey Webster. And the Corey Webster story is crazy. I don't know if you ever heard that one. I was sitting there one time. I was sitting there watching. We'd been there. It was January. We had just gotten there in December to get the job. And I'm sitting there watching the film. And Nick said, there's a receiver down in West St. John. I don't remember who it was. And he says, he's a really good player. Watch his film. So I'm in there watching it. Somebody walked in the staff room, in the offensive staff room, and talked to me. And I took my finger, because when the other team was on offense, I would hit the fast forward button to go watch this player because you're watching so many.
Yeah.
And I took my finger off the button, and I'm standing there, and somebody said something. So I went to look, and I went to hit the button, and I missed it. And the fast forward button. And as I did, Corey ran around the corner for about 15 yards just on a run. But he made two guys miss and looked just really fluid. And I said, dang. So I started watching him. Get done with the film. Nick says, hey, how's that receiver? I said, he's a good player. I said, there's a quarterback down here at St. James. It's a heck. He said, what do you know about him? I said, I don't know. I said, I never heard of him. He said, well, call down there. So I called down there, and they said, yeah, Corey Webster's a great player. I said, he's got one offer. And I said, really? I said, man, he looked a lot better than that on film. He said he's going to Southern Miss. I said, daggone. So I said, well, does he not have, well, maybe grades. You know what I mean? That guy doesn't have grades. Does he not have grades? And I said, has he been in? And then he said, no, he's got grades. I said, is he a troubled guy? Is he getting in trouble? Maybe he's been in trouble and people don't character, all the issues. I went through it all. And I said, what the heck? And he said, I don't know. So I told him, we go down there and start recruiting him. And that was 2 weeks before signing, guys.
Yeah.
And signed him. And signed him. And he only came a two-time All-American and played 13 years in the league, or 14 years, and 2 through 3 Pro Bowls and Super Bowls. And, I mean, that's the way Randall Gay. I mean, all those guys were recruited like. It was crazy. You could find guys like that. I don't know if it's like that as
Coach,
much anymore.
I want to ask you that. We got about 3 minutes left. I wanted to ask you, can you recruit that guy anymore? Like, do I get an offer? Does Flynn get an offer from an LSU, from a Florida State, from a Texas A&M? Because it almost feels like you can't stand up on top of the table and fight for that 2-star, that 3-star guy, because now that offer is going to somebody else.
I think it goes back to the coach. At Florida State, over half of our first-round picks were 3-star and down guys.
Right.
During my time at Florida State. Many great players we recruited when I was there. Half of them were 3-star guys down. We developed guys and saw guys that we thought fit in our system and did that. We never recruited by the stars. And I think you can if the coach is strong enough in his own mind to do it. And because it's always going to get back to one thing. Does the guy, can he produce, and does he develop on the field? You know what I mean? Yep. The development part's the other thing, where a guy needs development and he starts to get passed up a little bit. You know what I mean? Yep. I mean, you're going to miss guys too. I mean, coaches, we know there's a lot of guys I miss too. I mean, I'm talking about success stories, but Bjorn Warner was one for us at Florida. There was a bunch of them. Xavier Rhodes, they were all 3-star and guy downs that were all first-round picks. There's a lot more of them, but to me, it depends on the program and the coach and how much he believes in his own system.
Coach, we could sit here and actually we're going to ask that you come back on like later on. This is our first show together, so we certainly wanted to have you on. Obviously our relationship with you. Like, I want to have you back on here pretty soon to tell the story about around the horn, how you saw it. We ran it in the Superdome. We ran it at LSU, and Jamarcus didn't throw the football. Like I want.
Oh God, was it wide open, wasn't it? It was wide open.
It was wide open, Coach. You truly are the best, man. You did so much for me, for Matt, in our careers. You played us and put us in positions when a lot of other people probably wouldn't. So can't thank you enough. I enjoy doing radio with you over on Sirius XM every Tuesday during football season. That was a lot of fun for me.
And I just want to say that I would never have been an LSU Tiger without Jimbo Fisher.
Right, yeah.
And like that, y'all's coaching staff, like coaches have a huge impact on individual people, but that whole coaching staff, the impact you had on Louisiana, because you turned a program that was not great into one of the biggest powerhouses in the country. What a special staff, special time that was for LSU fans, and the economic, the boost that the state and the pride factor. Like, you were a part of something big, and you were one of the big reasons for that. And we love you, and we thank you, and we just appreciate the time this morning.